My wife said her ex was just a friend, until I caught them and took everything they had. My name is Liam Carter. The first time Marissa said his name again, it didn't feel important enough to remember. We were sitting across from each other at dinner, plates half finished. The quiet between us heavier than it used to be. Her phone buzzed lightly against the table, and she glanced down at it. Just a quick look, but long enough for something in her expression to change. A smile. Small, private, the kind I realized in that moment I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. "Who's that?" I asked, not thinking much of it. She flipped the phone over almost immediately. "Oh, just a friend." That answer should have been enough. It used to be enough. We had built our entire marriage on trust, the kind that doesn't require constant checking or second-guessing. We shared everything. Finances, plans, routines, even silence, especially silence. So I nodded and let it go. But something didn't sit right. Not wrong enough to challenge, not obvious enough to confront, just different. And different has a way of staying with you. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I noticed her phone glowing softly in the dark. She was turned slightly away from me, her thumb moving slowly across the screen. And then it happened again. That same smile. Quiet, hidden, not for me. That was the moment something shifted. Not in her, in me. Because for the first time, I didn't feel secure. I felt replaced. And I didn't even know by who. The changes didn't happen all at once. If they had, I probably would have confronted her immediately. But that's not how things like this unfold. They slip in quietly, blending into normal life until you can't separate what's changed from what's always been there. Marissa started staying late at work. At first, it was occasional, something easy to explain and even easier to accept. Deadlines, clients, unexpected meetings. All the usual reasons people use when life gets busy. I didn't question it. But then it became consistent. Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, sometimes Saturdays. Always the same tone when she explained it. Calm, reasonable. Just tired enough to make it believable. "Things are just hectic right now," she told me one evening, dropping her bag near the door. I nodded, like I always did. But later that night, something made me check our shared calendar. Nothing, no late meetings, no scheduled work events, just empty space where her explanations were supposed to be. That alone didn't prove anything, but it planted something. And once a thought like that takes root, it doesn't go away. The transactions were what changed suspicion into something more solid. I wasn't looking for them at first. I just happened to notice a charge while paying a bill, some cafe across town we had never been to together. I almost ignored it. But then I saw another one the next day, and another a few days later. Small amounts, nothing dramatic, but consistent. Too consistent. Restaurants, coffee shops, places far enough away that she wouldn't accidentally be there after work. I started scrolling further back through our account history. That's when the pattern became impossible to ignore. It lined up perfectly with her late nights. Same days, same time frames. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't random, this was routine. And routines mean planning. I sat there staring at the screen longer than I should have, my mind trying to find another explanation, something reasonable, something that didn't immediately lead to the conclusion forming in the back of my head. But no matter how I looked at it, everything pointed in the same direction. Still, I didn't confront her because I didn't want excuses. I wanted the truth. And the truth doesn't come out when you ask for it. It comes out when people think you're not looking. So I stopped asking questions. That was the turning point, the moment I decided I wasn't going to react emotionally. Not yet. Instead, I became the version of myself she was most comfortable with. Trusting. Predictable. Easy. I stopped bringing up her late nights. Stopped asking where she had been. Stopped paying visible attention altogether. And it worked faster than I expected. Within days, she relaxed. Her phone stayed out more often. She didn't angle the screen away from me anymore. Messages came in while we were sitting together, and she responded without hesitation. One evening, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while stepping outside to take a call. I wasn't planning to look, but it lit up, and I saw it. Same place tonight? No name. Just a number. 3 words that carried more weight than anything she had told me in weeks, because those weren't work-related. Those were familiar, casual, expected. That wasn't someone asking, that was someone confirming. I didn't touch the phone, I didn't need to, I just stood there for a second, longer than I should have, and then I walked away, because now I wasn't guessing anymore. I was getting close to knowing. That night, I memorized the number, not consciously at first, but it stuck in my mind the way important things do when you don't want to forget them. I waited until she fell asleep before doing anything about it. The room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of her breathing. I picked up my own phone and searched the number. It didn't take long. The name appeared almost immediately, Aaron Blake, and just like that, everything clicked into place. I knew that name. Not recently, but well enough. Her ex, the one she had mentioned years ago in passing, always dismissively. The one she had described as a mistake and something that didn't matter anymore. Apparently, it mattered now. I stared at the screen, waiting for anger to hit me, waiting for something sharp, something explosive, anything that would match what I had just confirmed. But what came instead was something quieter, heavier, clarity. Because this wasn't a suspicion anymore. It wasn't even a question. It was direction. And for the first time since all of this started, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I followed her 2 nights later, not impulsively, not emotionally, deliberately. She left at 7:10 p.m., just like she always did on her late work nights. She grabbed her bag, gave me a quick smile, and said the same thing she always said. Don't wait up. I nodded like it meant nothing. Then I waited exactly 10 minutes before leaving, enough time to avoid suspicion. Not enough to lose her. The drive was quiet. My hands were steady on the wheel, my thoughts unusually clear. I wasn't second-guessing anymore. I wasn't hoping to be wrong. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. She didn't go anywhere near her office. Instead, she drove straight downtown. That was the first confirmation. The second came when she parked outside a restaurant we had never been to together. Not once. Not even mentioned. I parked across the street, far enough to blend in, close enough to see, and then he appeared. Aaron. He was already there, standing near the entrance like he'd done this before, like he knew exactly when she'd arrive. Because he did. She stepped out of her car, looked at him, and smiled. Not polite. Not distant. Familiar. That was the moment everything inside me went still. Because there was no doubt left anymore, and there was no going back. I didn't stay to watch them go inside. I didn't need to. The way she looked at him had already told me everything I needed to know. There are moments in life when things break loudly, when everything shatters at once and leaves no room for doubt. This wasn't one of those moments. This was quieter, more controlled, more dangerous. Because instead of breaking, I adjusted. I drove home slowly, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wasn't. Everything felt clear now. When she walked through the door later that night, she looked exactly the same as always. No guilt, no hesitation, Just normal. How is work? I asked from the couch. She dropped her bag and exhaled. Long. I'm exhausted. The lie came so easily it almost felt practiced. And that's when it hit me. Not the betrayal itself, but the comfort she had with it. This wasn't new for her. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was something she had settled into. And if she was that comfortable lying, then confronting her now would only make her better at hiding it. So I smiled, nodded, and decided something right then. I wasn't going to react. I was going to prepare. The next morning, I started looking at everything differently, not emotionally. Logically, I opened our bank accounts, investment portfolios, property documents, everything tied to the life we had built together. And for the first time, I saw the risk clearly. Everything was shared. Joint accounts, joint ownership, joint decisions. It had always felt like trust. Now it felt like exposure. I started small, a new personal account, quiet transfers that wouldn't raise suspicion, documentation of my contributions records, timestamps, everything clean and legal. No sudden changes. No red flags, because the goal wasn't to move fast. It was to move without being noticed. Meanwhile, she continued exactly as before. Late nights, soft smiles at her phone. Occasional distance that she never explained because I never asked. And that was the key. The less I questioned, the more she revealed. The more she revealed, the more I understood. And understanding gave me something more valuable than proof. It gave me control. Weeks passed, and Marissa became more relaxed than I had ever seen her. Careless, even. She stopped pretending to hide things. Messages came in while we were sitting together, and she replied without hesitation. Sometimes she even smiled openly now, like she had stopped worrying about what I might think. Or worse, like she assumed I wasn't paying attention anymore. One night, she laughed softly at something on her phone, and I glanced over just long enough to see his name this time. Aaron. No disguise. No hidden contact. That told me everything I needed to know about how safe she felt. And people who feel safe make mistakes. I started paying closer attention not just to her, but to everything around her. Timing, locations, behavior, patterns within patterns. Because at that point, I wasn't just observing, I was building a timeline. And timelines don't lie. The deeper I looked, the more I uncovered. At first, it was just confirmation of what I already knew, their routine, their meetings, their consistency. But then something else started to surface, something I hadn't expected. The transactions changed. They weren't just small cafe charges anymore. There were larger amounts. Now, transfers, not frequent but noticeable, labeled vaguely. Consulting, project support. At first glance, they looked professional, but they weren't tied to anything real. No contracts, no business records, no explanation she had ever mentioned. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling something shift again. This wasn't just about meeting him anymore. This was deeper, more involved, and far more dangerous than I had originally thought, because this wasn't just emotional. Betrayal. This was financial, and that changed everything. I leaned back slowly, connecting the pieces in my head, and for the first time since this started, I realized something that made my next move very clear. She wasn't just lying to me, she was risking everything we had built. And she had no idea I already knew. I didn't confront her about the money. That was the first instinct I had to suppress. Because once money gets involved, emotions follow quickly, and emotions make people careless. I couldn't afford that. Instead, I started tracking everything more carefully, every transfer, every labeled expense, every unexplained shift in our accounts. What I found wasn't random. It was structured. The payments lined up almost perfectly with her meetings with Aaron. Not every time, but often enough to form a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Larger amounts followed longer meetups. Smaller ones followed quick visits. It wasn't spontaneous. It was deliberate. I dug deeper, cross-referencing dates, locations, timestamps, building something solid, something that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. And the more I uncovered, the clearer it became. She wasn't just seeing him, she was supporting him financially. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling something shift inside me again. This wasn't just betrayal anymore, this was risk. Real, measurable risk to everything we had built together. And the worst part? She had no idea how exposed she had just made herself. The next step was understanding why. Because people don't just transfer money without a reason, especially not money that isn't entirely theirs to give. So I started looking into Aaron more closely. Public records, business listings, social profiles, anything that could explain where those payments were going. It didn't take long to find something, or rather, the absence of something. His business had collapsed. What used to be a small but stable operation had quietly shut down months ago. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. And in its place, debt. I found traces of it everywhere, legal filings, unpaid obligations, stalled ventures. That's when everything clicked into place. The meetings, the money, the timing. This wasn't just a relationship, it was dependency, and she was funding it. I sat there for a long time, letting that realization settle in, because it changed the entire situation. She wasn't just choosing him, she was investing in him at our expense. And suddenly, this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about protection. That night, I watched her more closely than I ever had before. Not in an obvious way. In the small details, the way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her expression softened at certain messages, the way she seemed lighter after her late nights, like she was living two different lives and enjoying one of them more. At dinner, she barely touched her food. "Big day tomorrow," she said casually. "Might be another late one." I nodded, keeping my voice even. "Of course." She smiled faintly, relieved by the lack of questions. That was the moment I understood something clearly. She didn't just expect my trust anymore, she depended on it. And that made what I was doing even more effective, because while she felt safe, I was getting closer to finishing everything. I met with my lawyer again the next day. This time, I didn't frame it as financial restructuring. I brought everything. The records, the timelines, the transfers. I didn't need to say much. The evidence spoke for itself. He reviewed everything carefully, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking for clarification. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed slightly. "This gives you leverage," he said. "Not sympathy. Not shock. Leverage." That was the word that mattered. We went through everything step by step, what could be secured, what could be separated, what could be protected before anything became public. Timing was critical. If I moved too early, she could react. If I moved too late, I could lose control. So we built a plan that didn't rely on chance, only execution. When I left that office, I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. The final phase began quietly. There were no dramatic changes, no sudden confrontations. Just a series of controlled decisions that shifted everything beneath the surface. Accounts were separated more definitively, access was limited legally, subtly, without triggering immediate suspicion. Assets were documented and protected with precision. Everything I had built, everything I had contributed, was now clearly defined, and she still had no idea. That was the part that struck me the most. She moved through each day the same way she always had, confident, relaxed, completely unaware of how much had already changed. One evening, she mentioned another late meeting. I smiled. "Take your time." She nodded, grateful, and as she walked out the door, I realized something that made everything feel final. She thought she was in control. She thought she was managing both sides of her life without consequence, but in reality, she was already losing everything. She just hadn't realized it yet. The final move didn't start with confrontation, it started with timing. By then, everything was already in place, accounts separated, documentation secured, access quietly restricted in ways she hadn't noticed yet. Nothing illegal, nothing aggressive, just precise. I waited for the right moment. It came on a Thursday. She told me she'd be working late again, her tone casual, almost automatic now. She didn't even try to make it convincing anymore. "Big client issue," she said, grabbing her bag. I nodded. "Take your time." And I meant it. Because while she was out maintaining her other life, I finalized mine. That evening, I signed the last set of documents with my lawyer. Everything was now officially structured, clean, legal, irreversible. There was a strange calm that came with it. Not satisfaction, not relief, control. For the first time since this started, I knew exactly how this would end, and more importantly, so did the paperwork. When she came home that night, nothing had changed. At least, not on the surface. She looked the same, moved the same, even kissed me on the cheek the same way she always had. "How was your night?" she asked. "Productive," I said. That was the truth. Just not the truth she thought I meant. She didn't ask anything else, and that told me everything. Because people who are hiding something rarely ask questions they don't want answers to. That night, as she scrolled through her phone beside me, smiling at messages she didn't share, I realized something important. She wasn't worried anymore. She had crossed the point where caution mattered, which meant she believed she was safe, completely safe. And that made what came next unavoidable. The confrontation didn't happen immediately. I gave it 2 more days, not because I needed more proof, but because I wanted everything aligned perfectly. Saturday morning, everything was ready. She was sitting at the table, coffee in hand, scrolling her phone like it was any other day. I sat across from her. "Marissa," I said calmly. She looked up, slightly surprised by my tone. "Yeah?" I held her gaze for a moment, not angry, not emotional, just steady. "We need to talk." Something shifted in her expression immediately. "Not guilt instinct?" "What about?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my folder and placed a few printed documents on the table. Bank records, dates, transfers. Her eyes moved over them slowly, and for the first time since this started, she didn't have an immediate response. The silence stretched longer than I expected. She stared at the papers, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to something else entirely. "Where did you get this?" she asked finally, her voice quieter than usual. "That's not the important part," I said. I watched her carefully, not for what she said, but for how she reacted, because reactions don't lie the way words do. "This isn't what it looks like," she said quickly. There it was. Not denial. Explanation, which meant she knew exactly what it looked like. I nodded slightly. "Then explain it." She hesitated. Just for a second, but long enough. "It's complicated," she said. I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said calmly. "It's actually very simple." That's when her composure started to crack. Because for the first time, she realized I wasn't guessing. She tried everything after that. First, she minimized it. "It's not serious," she said. "You're making it bigger than it is." Then she shifted. He needed help. I was just helping him get back on his feet. Then finally, when neither worked, she went quiet. And that silence said more than anything else she could have said. I let it sit for a moment before speaking. Again. "You used our money," I said evenly. She didn't respond. "You lied about where you were," I continued. Still nothing. "And you expected me not to." Notice. That's when she finally looked up at me. Not defensive, not angry, just caught. And in that moment, everything between us felt different. Not broken, finished. Because this wasn't about what she had done anymore. It was about what came next. And for the first time since this started, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. The days that followed weren't loud. There were no arguments echoing through the house, no dramatic exits or slam doors, just silence. The kind that settles in when both people understand something has ended, even if no one has said it out loud yet. Marissa moved differently after that conversation. Slower, more careful. Not because she was trying to fix anything, because she was trying to understand what had already happened. "What does this mean?" she asked me 2 days later, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. I looked at her for a moment before answering. "It means things have changed." That was all I said, because the details weren't something I needed to explain anymore. They were already in motion, legal filings had been submitted, financial structures had shifted, access to certain accounts had already been restricted in ways she hadn't fully discovered yet. Everything was happening exactly as planned, and she was only just starting to see it. It didn't take long for her to notice the first real consequence. 3 days later, she tried to access one of our shared accounts. It didn't work. At first, she thought it was a mistake, a system error, something temporary. But when she checked another account, the same result. That's when she came to me. "There's something wrong with the accounts," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I met her eyes. "No, there isn't." The realization hit her slowly. "You changed them?" "I protected them," I replied. That word landed harder than anything else I could have said, because it reframed everything. This wasn't punishment, this was consequence. And she knew it. The final piece fell into place a week later. She tried to reach Erin. I didn't know the exact moment it happened, but I saw the aftermath. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone in her hand, staring at the screen like it had betrayed her too. "He's not answering," she said quietly. I didn't respond. She tried again. Called, messaged, waited. Nothing. Minutes turned into hours. And then came the realization she hadn't prepared for. He wasn't just unavailable. He was gone. Blocked. Disconnected. Completely out of reach. That was the moment everything shifted for her, because until then, she still believed she had something to fall back on. But now, there was nothing. She came to me that night, not angry, not defensive, just lost. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said, her voice breaking slightly. I watched her carefully, trying to see if there was anything left to recognize. But there wasn't, because the person I had trusted wasn't standing in front of me anymore. "What did you think would happen?" I asked. She didn't answer, because there wasn't a good answer, only reality. And reality had finally caught up with her. In the end, there was no dramatic ending, no final argument, no last attempt to fix what had already been broken beyond repair. Just distance. Legal closure followed. Everything finalized exactly as planned. Clean, structured, irreversible. The life we had built didn't disappear. It shifted, and she wasn't part of it anymore. Erin never came back. Not for her, not for anything. And that was the part she struggled to accept the most. Because in the end, She hadn't just lost me, she had lost everything for someone who was never going to stay. I saw her one last time before everything was finalized. She looked like someone trying to understand how everything had slipped away so completely. "You said he was just a friend," I told her. She didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. I walked away without anger, without hesitation, because I didn't need either anymore. The truth had done everything it needed to do. And as I stepped into a life that was finally mine again, one thought stayed with me clear, simple, final. She chose him over everything we built, and in the end, even he didn't choose her.